And I'm going to give it to our presenters. Brooke and Tom, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to start it off. This is really Brooke's presentation, but I kind of get an introduction to her. I think I'd be remiss if I didn't thank the Legacy staff for this opportunity and for the great presentations that we've had. Sarah, you do a great job at communicating and getting this all put together. And I don't know, I think this is a hard act to follow, but that Pat James's presentation was, I'm kind of a plant guy, and that was pretty awesome to me to see her work. What I'm going to just do is talk a little bit about the partnership, and I'm going to lead into Brooke's presentation. So Brooke, if you want to start, can we see the slides now, or I don't have it? Presentation.
Yep, I'll go ahead and share this.
Yeah, if you just want to throw that up there, and then we'll start it off. And I'll just give you a little update on the partnership and what we're doing. I think one thing that's important, you can probably go to the next slide, Brooke, if you'd like, is yeah, you can go to there we go. Yep. Is that I think from this part of the world around an urban area, it's important, I think, for people to realize how difficult it is sometimes to put these places together for people to access for a lot of these projects that go on. And there's a lot of efforts that were done by a lot of people to open up a lot of the spaces with the saline wetlands for people to just come and go as they pretty much please. And we could do a lot of research and education and the work that Brooke does. But there is a lot of efforts, not just me, but by many people to make this happen over the last 20 years. The partnership, and since 2002, we've acquired over 2,000 acres of land at a cost of about a little over $7 million. So, there's a lot of resources that go into that. And from those sources and the restoration aspects of the partnership, I just did a count the other day, and I think we've utilized like 20 to 25 different funding sources. So there's a lot of people that are involved, and a lot of agencies and conservation organizations to make it happen for people to visit these areas and expose them in greater detail to a lot of residents in the Nebraska community and in a whole. As far as the acquisition aspects, there's always, a lot of these are degraded wetlands, and the partnership has done, just give you some figures on that. We've done 3 large restoration projects. It seems like they've always been about every 5 years apart. And, one was Frank Shoemaker Marsh in 2007, then there's Arbor Lake in 2012, and then more recent Marsh Wren. And all of those are over $1 million projects. And if you put them to the acreage, it averages about, $7,200 an acre to restore these particular properties, to try to just rejuvenate them and try some new things on those. And it creates research opportunities for a lot of students at the university, and then we have a lot of students that come from the Lincoln schools, from anywhere from Cub Scout second graders up to high schoolers that really come out and try to learn about these wetlands. And that's what I'm kind of looking forward to, really Ted's project with the Nebraska wetlands, to kind of just broader perspective and reach out to so many more people to create an interest in this. In the saline wetlands and the other wetlands that are all the natural resources that are available in this state. Just Brooke, if you could probably go to the next slide if you'd like. And
yeah, hey, are you seeing a gray box in the middle of the screen, Amber or Tom? Or
I do not have one.
I'm not. No.
No,
I can see your screen fully.
Yep. Okay. Good deal. Okay.
Thanks,
Tom.
But
I'm I know about that gray box, no worries.
I'm
Yeah,
glad
Tom, you
someone
just tell me
does.
when to advance. Yeah,
Okay.
sometimes I don't know about the gray box. Okay.
But this here is one of the restoration projects. This is Arbor Lake, and this is an aerial. I think Brooke did it with a drone probably a year ago, and it just created a lot more saline flats in that particular area. It's a 132-acre project. So there you're looking kind of east on this project, but that just kind of visualize some of the things that we do. I mean, actually, the one kind of grayish white blob in the upper left corner was pretty much what existed prior to restoration. So, we try to enhance that habitat as we go through these projects. The next slide, Brooke. And this here is marsh wren. And this is what I'm going to try to get through here next minute or two. And that Brooke and I met probably 5 years ago, Brooke, out at Marsh Wren, and she talked about a project. I think you were an undergrad at that time, and through a lot of life's gives and takes, it took a little while, and Brooke has finished up her educational project, which kind of centered on Marsh Wren, and then that led to her working with the Platte Basin Timelapse, and I'll let her talk more about it. But then this was restored. We did a restoration project, Lower Platte South NRD, and that was finished in 2017. And a lot of birders out there. This site, I think the last I've seen since probably the fall of 17, there's been 221 bird species that have been noted on this particular site, and it's close to the community. So it's probably one of our most heavily visited sites in the Saline wetlands. Next slide. This one I really like because it's in the winter. I always tell, and I've told Brooke and I tell a lot of other people, I said, we see a lot of pictures of the natural resources in Nebraska, but hardly any in the winter. And we actually live in the winter for about 5 months out of the year. So, sometimes that's one of my favorite times to go out to the wetlands because it's so peaceful and quiet. You don't have any bugs, but you learn to identify different plants and different times of the year and such. But it's, you got to put things in perspective. When you're in Nebraska, it's not always green. It's not always growing. We've got winter time to deal with. But this is Shoemaker Marsh, and it doesn't really show some of the restoration, but we did create access there for management and visitation of the property. Next one. Okay, here, we get asked a lot, well, what are the values of the wetlands? We've partnerships taken a lot of heat regarding the endangered species and people feeling threatened with their land. But this one is right next, just adjacent to the northern city limits, and this was a flood we had in 2015, and that's on your left side. On the right side is the photo taken in 2016 on the same date from approximately the same location. And that water, that was a 132-acre site, so it held about I say the depth was probably 3 to 4 feet, the water there, and it's a 132-acre site, and there's homes immediately to adjacent to it to the south. So there are some values there to the wetlands other than the habitat and mammals and things. So to the community, as a developing community, it's important to realize some of these benefits that the wetlands provide. And the next one shows basically the same issue, but the same situation, but at a different point, different location. So you can see how much water that was backed up in that wetland that held that water for probably 1 or 2 days before it eventually made its way to Little Salt Creek and Salt Creek. But there are some values of those wetlands. And I'm going to finish up here just with some of the things we got going on now. We do have a restoration project that's taking place at Haynes Branch. We're doing a stream stabilization project, and that's in critical habitat for endangered species. And that's ongoing now, should be finished in a month or two. We do have a large project going on with NRCS called the PL 566, and that's through the NRD. And then we do have Dr. Tang from UNL is doing a sensor project where he's setting up, he has wireless monitors in a number of locations that's doing this, the salinity and the hydrology and vegetation communities. That's a 3-year project through a PhD student. And then acquisition, we're always continually looking for acquisition in the city of Lincoln with looking for a park in the northwest quadrant of the community. So we're trying to pair that up, and it's given us an opportunity to contact some conservation owners that we previously haven't been able to really inquire about too much as far as land acquisition with saline wetlands. So it's opened up a few opportunities there. And then we continually do fund development. So that's pretty much all I'm going to talk about. I'm going to give it to Brooke. I should let you know that the partnership consists of the City of Lincoln, Nebraska Game Parks Commission, Lower Platte South NRD, and Pheasants Forever Inc. And it's a good partnership, good people. We partner with a lot of other organizations also, but the program continues, and hopefully we'll bring some more good things and open some more great areas for the public to view. So I'm going to let Brooke go with it. Thank you for having me on, and Brooke, have fun.
Well, thanks, Tom. And yeah, thanks just for inviting me here today, and giving me, giving us and Tom 60 minutes to present. So I think what I'm going to do, just so you guys know how we're going to use our time, is it's about 3:30 now. And so I'm going to talk through my graduate project, which was all about the saline wetlands and specifically marsh wren. And Tom, if you have anything to add or chime in, please go ahead. And then Amber, I'm going to ask you to just, give me that 15-minute warning so we make sure we have time for questions. And it's going to be a little conversational, and I want to show you guys what I've been working on, and hopefully it helps everybody in the audience kind of get an idea of, what you can do with the power of photography and the power of storytelling. So here's me. My mentor, Mike Forsberg, through the Platte Basin Timelapse, says every good story has to start with a good character. So this is me in all of my camo gear, which is pretty much what I spent the last probably 5 years doing, dressing up in camouflage gear and going out to the saline wetlands to try and see what I could see. I grew up in Omaha, and I never knew that the saline wetlands were here, so close to my home, and also that they're so unique. And I know probably most of you in the audience may know this, but they're biologically unique landscapes. And like what Tom was saying is, they're really valuable. So when Tom and I met out at Marsh Wren, I don't think, I don't know how many times you had been out there before that, but I think it was one of the first few times because we were walking with the Flatwater group. And I thought, hey, this would be a really cool spot to do a graduate project. And I had a few people in my life pushing me to continue my education. So what I did, along with a few others who are through Platte Basin Timelapse, Grant, Ethan, and Dakota, I went ahead and started a Master's of Applied Science in Conservation Storytelling is what I'm calling it. That's a little unofficial, but I would like to see that designation happen in the university sometime in the future. And I think a lot of students are really interested in it. So here's a little visualization of what all makes up a Master's of Applied Science in Conservation Storytelling. At least for me personally, you can see this little Venn diagram graphic. All these different elements went into it. So I'm going to start at the top: education, science, journalism, interpersonal skills, public speaking, and art. And those are all of the things that combined into my degree. And it was really neat to be able to to be able to craft my degree program. And I'm really grateful that I got to be able to do it. And I do want to give a shout out to UNL Outdoor Adventures, who funded the first 2 years of my graduate program. And then the School of Natural Resources also funded an additional semester. And everybody with the Saline Wetland Conservation Partnership and the Platte Basin Timelapse and Nebraska Game Parks has really helped me through this whole process. So yeah, I did my undergrad in 4 years, and then it took me 4 years to do my Master's of Applied Science. So right now I'm at an even 8 years, and there's some people out there in the audience who are like, yeah, you should do your PhD. But you know what? I think I'm going to take a break for a little bit because I've had a lot of fun. I'd like to see some other students do this kind of stuff too. But we'll see what happens. So I want to show you one other graphic. So my whole project was about marshland, which I'll explain a little bit more about in a little bit. But these are all the different tools that I use to create my graduate project. Because if you don't know this, when you do a Master's of Applied Science degree, you can choose a thesis route or a project route. So I chose to do a project route. I could probably write the thesis with all of the different things I ended up doing because I'm really curious and I can't stop once I get onto something. So I'll go around the Venn diagram here. Motion detect trail cameras, which if you're at the last session, you know a lot more about those and how amazing they are and what cool tools they are. Use a professional DSLR camera, use computer mapping software, drone technology, wildlife photography blinds, which if you don't know what that is, it's like a little hunting blind kind of where you go and you, instead of hunting for animals, you're hunting for a photo. And then time-lapse cameras. So I'm going to go through each of these and you'll be able to see some of the materials from each of those little sections. So like what Tom said earlier, this is a Saline Wetland Conservation Partnership. If you don't know what that is, I mean, it's these three are the originals right here. So you got Tom on the left side, you got Ted up on that upper right corner, and you've got Dan Schultz. And these guys have just done so much for the saline wetlands. And I didn't know that I would fall so deeply in love with this landscape. And I think part of it is because I am connected to oceans, and the saline wetlands are little inland oceans. So it's really neat to know that these three have conserved all this land and that there's just a lot to offer. So here's me, and I've at Marshland, and I'm going to talk to you about what the salines taught me. So one of the biggest things is they're geologically unique, and this is for people in the audience who might not know, but millions of years ago, Nebraska was completely underwater, and so only in this eastern part of Nebraska can this salt come up through these underground geologic deposits, which is Dakota sandstone, I believe. There's like what Tom talked about earlier, there's a little bit of a question. Scientists are looking at it right now because we don't fully understand it, but it might be coming from an even deeper layer called the Pennsylvanian layer. And if you guys want to know more about this, and if I'm talking a different language now, at the end of the presentation, you can go on my website that I built and you can learn more about all of that. So let's keep going. So salt tolerant plant species live within these wetlands, and there's a lot of species right here. And Tom, why don't you identify the species that are in this photo right now? If you're still there, because I can't see yet.
Yeah, I think you've got foxtail barley, which is kind of on the edges, and then you got an inland saltgrass that might be alkali, bulrush there. And I'd say there's probably some sea blight down the lower canopy. So that's about, I can see. I don't see no saltwort in that particular one, but okay, put me on the spot.
So there's, I told you I would. So hey, there's some saltwort, and this is actually a state listed species, so it's state endangered. So pretty much everything you saw in the last photo and this photo is kind of all those really unique plant species, and there's a few more that I still need to take some photographs of. Here's another shot of inland saltgrass. And here's a shot of marsh elder. And like I say, all of those plant species, you can find them on the coast, or you can find them here in the middle of Nebraska, because you're getting like, that saline water. So it's creating a similar, but, different and unique environment. So there's interesting insects out in the saline wetlands. Of course, I love bumblebees. It's our state insect. And I'm sure a lot of you have heard about the Salt Creek tiger beetle. And this image is courtesy of Mike, and all these other images were part of my grad project. And I know that this Salt Creek tiger beetle has played a huge role in helping to get a bunch of land for the saline wetland complexes. And I think it's certainly a hot topic, and I've had some interesting conversations with people around there. But what's really neat is that there's something about these wetlands that I think can draw everybody in, and it kind of unites us in a way. It's what I've kind of learned through spending time out there. Here's some other just favorite insect shots from out there. So there's some salt marsh aster, and I think it's a sulfur. Maybe somebody in the audience could point me in the right direction for the specific species. And lots of spiders. A lot of us are curious about, like, what are all the different spiders that are out in the saline wetlands? Something that was really interesting to me that I didn't expect I would go in this direction, I started really researching a lot about our history of Lincoln, and Lincoln is here because of the saline wetlands. And then I started thinking a lot about, well, how have we altered the landscape or changed it? So I ended up drawing this map, which was drawn on the computer, and it's really mimicking a blueprint. That's kind of why it's blue. And then you can see there that in the, the purple, there is estimated city limits of Lincoln, Nebraska at the time of 1876. And then the white lines are the water. All of those creek systems were historically salty, and some of them still are. And so this is kind of what the difference is between the 1800s and 2020. And so I started thinking about, like, we've really altered this landscape. And, how are we going to move forward in the future? And how are we going to kind of accept where it's at now, but keep integrating it into, new neighborhoods that might expand, or maybe we could, restore some of the stuff that's in Lincoln. And especially what the Saline Wetland Conservation Partnership is doing is we're protecting, stuff that's around the city. So here's a difference between the two. And on my website, it's actually an interactive slider. So that's been a favorite among a lot of grade school children to be able to look at the difference there. And I think it's a really powerful tool to kind of visualize something like that. It simplifies the information. So that's kind of saline wetlands as a whole. And now I'm going to talk about marshland specifically. And so this was a photo that I probably tried, I think, for 2 years to get. And it finally happened. And this is a marshland, which is what the wetland is named for. So what's really cool that they did out there was it was kind of a different approach, kind of something that they'd never done before, the way I understand it. They'd done a little bit of it, of this kind of method of restoring the wetland, but maybe not as intense as marshland. So you can see in this photograph, it's a drone photo. There's a white line, and that's a pipe. So what they're essentially doing is irrigating salt. So they contracted out the Flatwater group, and Dan did some groundwater test sites and found out that, well, hey, it's really salty underground, and why don't we stick a pipe down and pump it up and kind of speed up, kind of compress time, really is what they've done. And it's been really neat, because if you see the white in that photograph, that actually is the salt that's coming out of the pipe, which I believe is about 100 feet underground. And so if you take a closer look, here's the water actually coming out, and little salt grass growing around it. And then what's really neat is, if you're here last year, Dan talked a lot about this, is the saltworts growing up around this pipe system. And so, Tom, was this 3 years in the process from when you put the pipe out to when you're seeing the first instance of saltwort?
Yeah, I think that's probably right, Brooke. I think it was right in that time period, because the construction was completed in 17. So I think it was probably 19 when it's Dan Schultz from the Lower Platte South NRD, when he noted the saltwort starting to take its place on the landscape. And just a tidbit, the salt water that comes out of here is two-thirds the consistency of ocean water. So it's very salty, and the wells are 180 feet deep.
Thanks for that, Tom, because I didn't realize that it was that salty until I think I was out hiking, and these guys were like, you should taste it. And so I did, and it was really salty. And if you guys ever go on a hike with Ted or Tom, you got to watch out, because they'll tell you to eat that, and then they'll turn around and tell you that they could arrest you. So because it's a state listed plant, right? So, but on the coast, it's not. So a lot of people will actually eat it on salads and things. So I'm not encouraging anyone to go out and pick the saltwort right now. Please don't do that. But if you do go to the coast and it's more common, maybe give it a try. So another big part of my project was actually game cameras, which was funded by the Saline Wetland Conservation Partnership. And this is a frame that was caught or was captured on the big pond, which is kind of that big centerpiece that you guys saw at the beginning of the presentation where we were looking down on Marshland. So this has been a really fun thing for me because I just didn't realize how many, how much wildlife was here right on the edge of town, on the edge of Lincoln. And so here's some, like, I call them time-lapse tiles that I put together. And you can see, the different animal species going throughout the different seasons. And so on the right, you've got a raccoon in spring, summer, fall and winter. And if you if you look closely enough at the very first frame of the raccoon on the top, the spring one, it's got a baby following it, which is kind of cool. In the middle, you got Canada geese. And then on the right side, you've got a hodgepodge of different species. So you kind of get to see like the everyday lives of these animals, and it's really fun. And then they catch some pretty crazy moments too of like deer running. And I can't tell you like how many kids have just fallen in love with this photograph. So this is on that same, this is that same peninsula that we started the game camera slideshow with the cormorants, and it's really pink. This is just looking the other direction. So these can also kind of be used as time-lapse cameras, so you can see things change throughout the season. This is on the east side of Marsh Wren, and you can see how when they started pumping the water, it filled up, and they're able to control the water really well. And so it's kind of neat to be able to see like these management practices like actually come to life. You got, deer, raccoon, a pheasant in the wetlands, Canada geese again, shorebirds. And this is a video of the confluence of Salt Creek and Little Salt Creek. And I'm gonna see if you guys can count the deer crossing that. So if anybody is feeling like they can count the deer, throw the number in the chat.
Yeah, the first time Brooke showed me this, I said, I was waiting for the alligator to jump out of Salt Creek and grab one.
That would be pretty funny. So another big part of the project was tending to these time-lapse cameras that were throughout Marsh Wren. And if you don't know what time-lapse cameras are, they're camera systems that are hooked into a solar panel, and they can sit out on the landscape and they can take a picture whenever you want to set the little timer inside too. So these cameras that have been out at Marsh Wren, which there's 5 total, and just for sake of time, I just picked one, but you can go online and check out all of the sites. This is my favorite one. This takes a picture on the hour of every daylight hour of every day. And so I just picked 12 of my favorites through the seasons. So we're going to go through the 12 months. So this is January, February, March, April, and May. June, July, and August. And if you look closely, there is a little muskrat swimming through the right side of the frame in the pond. Well, what I believe to be a muskrat by the shape of its V, but I guess it could be something else. Could be that alligator. October, which is in the month we're on now. I believe this was 2 years ago now. November, through maybe 3 years ago, no, 2 years ago now, yep. And then December. So it's really neat when you start to, you can see them one by one, or you can put them together and you can really see how the land changes and how it breathes and how it moves. So on the lines of time lapse, this was, I started getting into drones because I thought, well, I'd like to, I'm standing on the ground and I'm looking out and I'm seeing it change. Well, what if I could look above? Okay, there's satellite imagery that I could pull, but I kind of wanted to see it in a higher frequency. I thought, well, what if I went out to marshland for a year and every month I made these drone maps? So I'm a drone hobbyist. By flying the drone 300 feet up in the air and pointing the camera straight down. This was my first attempt at a drone map. And I believe that this is probably like 50 or 60 photos that I took. So then I thought, okay, well, I want to see the whole place. I want to see how it changes. So I did. So I went out and flew the drone looking straight down, and it can't fly high enough to take a photo like that. What you can have it do is you can have it fly at a certain height and take pictures moving along a grid. And so this is 595 photos stitched together into one. And I think that it's a pretty powerful tool that could probably be used by other researchers if they're wanting like a higher quality and more frequent documentation of restoration or whatever land management practices you're doing. So here's a video of them together through the seasons. And so it can be applied a bazillion different ways, but this is just one way that I decided to look at it. And not all 12 months worked out in a year. I think it actually took a year and a half, but I got all 12 months because there are usually, technology issues. But this one, I really like this contrast because you can really see the salt that is coming out of those pipe systems that they installed. So, you can see it all over the pond in the middle of the frame, and you can see it on, more towards the center of the frame where you've got this like, green emerald. I think Tom calls that the Hemi Marsh. And then you can see it down towards the confluence of Little Salt Creek and Salt Creek. So the Little Salt Creek's coming in that left part of the frame. And you can see it down there as well. So really interesting. So one of the things that I started thinking about when I was, doing all that drone technology was I was watching houses pop up on the left side of the frame. And I didn't really direct your attention towards that, but it's really important. It's probably one of the most important things. And if you were to go through those drone time-lapse tiles again, you'd see houses popping up because, every month there's a house. And so it really got me thinking about what is this human-wild interface that we have here? And when I'm in these saline wetlands, it feels really wild. It feels like I'm connected to the ocean. For some reason, one reason I get really emotional about it is I actually feel really connected to my mom. And for those of you who don't know, she passed away, I think 4 or 5 years ago now. So I took her out to the saline wetlands, and that was the last hike that we shared together. And that was the last conversation that we shared together. And we saw a deer when we were together. And it was really neat because every time that I go out in these wetlands, I see deer, and I know that they're common species, and I know that they annoy some people, but I think there's something really spiritual and really magical about them. And one thing that's really, really important is that they're really accessible. A lot of people can probably go out and see a deer. And if they're taking their kids or they're taking another younger generation, it can kind of pass that wonder along. So that's kind of why I get emotional when I talk about saline wetlands, is because I think about all the people who have gone before me, and I think about all the people who will have these opportunities if we keep protecting these spaces. And it gives me hope, is what I should say, because you could look at this photograph and you could be really disappointed that all these houses are popping up next to this space. but I'm trying to teach myself to see opportunity in that because, you know, people are going to be really, really close to these spaces. And so it makes me think about students and it makes me think about this next generation. I'm going to turn 30 next year. That doesn't scare me, but I'm starting to think, hey, you know, how much life do I have left? And how much life do we all have left? I don't really know when the clock is going to stop ticking. So I might as well take people out and I might as well celebrate where we're at. I could be angry at all this urban encroachment, or I could celebrate it and see it as an opportunity. And obviously there's still a lot of places that we want to keep far away from cities so that they are nice and quiet and they'll be nice, best kept secrets. But the fact is we'll keep expanding. So another thing I was thinking about is we're really inspired by nature. And if you look at this photograph, you can see on the top of the frame, Salt Creek and Little Salt Creek, the confluence. And you can see in the bottom of the frame where there's that urban development, you see Saline Drive and Saline Circle. Well, to me, it looks like they're mimicking each other. It looks like they're kind of in a dance. And I think this is something that I would just challenge everyone in the audience to think about is, like, as conservationists and as researchers, like, how are we going to choose to move forward? This is one of the ways that we can help inspire people to really think about what's in their backyard and what to do about it. So I'm always chasing something, just like the deer. For me, a lot of times it's chasing that one next photograph or that capturing that one moment. And so I'm starting to expand it further and thinking about, well, how do I share all this awesome work that's happening with other people? And then, you know, how do we get people out to explore these wetlands so they fall in love with them? So what future will you chase? We can go into a discussion if we have time. I think I went over time, or we can engage in that at another time. And I think, Tom, you were gonna wrap it up.
I think we have plenty of time left yet, Brooke.
Oh, good deal. Where am I at?
So
Yep.
I don't know if you had other slides or anything else you wanted to show or not, but
Yeah, I do actually. So if we did
okay.
have time, I was gonna.
Yeah, but we have about 7 minutes because I know you wanted about 15 minutes towards the end.
Good.
For questions. Okay. So we have 7 minutes if you have any other content. Otherwise, we can.
Yep. So let's do the screen share switcheroo we discussed so that I can show the accumulation of all this. So let's do that.
Go. I just thought so you can share your next screen.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up the interactive map that I made for grad school. And I'm going to show you some more education potential that's there. And I think that one of the reasons I know Tom wanted me to talk today was, one, to share the work that I was doing. And but two, I think that there's probably like a lot of potential if anyone else out there is like interested in communicating, you know, what landscape that you're researching or that you're interested in. I know that there's students on campus who are starting to get really excited about this kind of stuff. And so it would be interesting to connect after this and, you know, maybe talk more, but okay.
Brooke, while you're pulling that up, I would definitely look to find that website that you mentioned. I can share it in the comments whenever, or you can do it. Be sure to do it after. So
yeah, I can share that with you after. So we should be good now. Unless you guys see yourself. You guys see the map?
I saw your map for a moment and now I don't see it. I just see you presenting. So you could try one more time and see if that will work.
Okay, well, let's try it. This is the part that I've okay, now do you see a map?
Yeah.
All right, sweet. Okay, so what I'm going to show you is part of the mapping that I did to tell the story of the wetlands. And so this is in the middle of the website that you all will be able to check out at the end. But this doesn't translate well that a way I've found. So that's why I switched to the website, because I wanted to show you how it looks on here and maybe give you some ideas of like how you could map out wherever your, area of interest is. So this kind of gives people perspective as to where we are, which I guess kind of like me, I didn't really understand where we were until more towards the end of my project. But basically that's where our place is in the world, is right in that portion of eastern Nebraska in North America. And then to visualize the history, which we're going to bounce back to kind of the first part of my presentation, the reason the saline wetlands are here at all is because this place used to be completely underwater. And so I spent some time putting these maps together to kind of help, teachers be able to use it as a tool. And so then I go on to talk about like my connections to my childhood and other rivers and things like that. So hopefully you guys can get a chance to check this out. And then I think, Tom, we talked about showing this part, which is kind of the end of my presentation. I would say that moving forward, something that I want to share more is how people can get out into these wetlands and explore them for themselves. So for example, there's one right in the middle of town, and it's what kind of started it all. And so I put all of these lines on this map, and you can click and people could read what these little places are about. And they can even click on the little parking symbol, and if they're on their phone, they can get directions to drive there.
Now, will that have links like on Marsh Renbrook to photos from the site?
We could continue to build this out. So like if you zoom into Marsh Ren here, and this is live right now, like you guys can use this. There's a lot of potential. You could put photos into here if you wanted to like give people an idea of what it's like to walk through. So this was part of this part of my project is at the end of my master's project to get people out and explore, and populating it more with more, pictures and stuff. I was kind of starting to be beyond the scope of my project, but I would really like to continue this in the future. And I think it'd be really interesting, like what you're saying, Tom, is to put, you could put photos of these actual places. So like if people maybe couldn't hike or there are accessibility issues, they could take a virtual hike with like all of the, media that's already there. So Shoemaker Marsh was the location I was referencing as the last hike with my mom. And so this one I actually spent the most time on building it out. After my grad project ended, I kept working on it. And so you can see I put symbols on it to tell you the trails and to tell you where to go and stuff like that. And I think that this is something that like, I was able to teach myself how to do it. So I think, you could do this for any area that you would be interested in. And once you kind of get the hang of it, you can add to it pretty easily. So. So I'm going to stop share and just kind of close with like, this whole project like wouldn't have been possible without the support of the Saline Wetland Conservation Partnership and the support of UNL Outdoor Adventures and the support of Platte Basin Timelapse and countless other friends and family. So there's definitely like an emotional element to it for me, but I think like that's what's really central to stories. And so I I would like to see like, you know, more of this kind of happen. And it doesn't necessarily have to be like this heavy stuff. It can just be that you fall in love with some landscape. But at least for me, it's just a good reminder of like, you know, how much time do I have left and what am I going to do with it? And so I guess that's just like the point I wanted to drive home today. And that saline wetlands, you know, they could have been totally eradicated if it weren't for some foresight and some attitudes like that. So
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Brooke and Tom. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording now because we'll start our questions.